In this video, I want to dive deep into my transition from full-time employee to full-time founder because I feel that there is so much talk on this topic, and I want to provide additional context and additional viewpoints as well from my experience, from my perspective, that might be beneficial to you or somebody that you know. And today I do have my iPad, but it's unscripted. I just actually done some bullet points because I want to ensure that I cover all bases and I don't necessarily get too much off track, because there are times when I record videos and I'm like, damn, I wish I said that. So this will make sure that I cover absolutely everything. And also, just a quick note, when I done my last batch of videos, I looked at them and I was like, Danielle, you didn't clean your camera and you were far too away from the camera. So this time I've corrected it and I've done some testing beforehand. So all being well, this should come out as it needs to, including the lighting and everything else. So my last date of employment with my employer, Global Fashion Group, GFG, is on LinkedIn, public knowledge, was the 30th of April, 2026. And I briefly spoke about it in Founder Unpacked episode 3. And I'm saying 2026 because, hey, never know when someone's going to be watching this in the future anyway. And so basically, there was so much about that process where, and I'll probably just give you a bit more insight on that. So, when I was off on medical leave, I spoke about my surgery and time being off. So, you can go back to that video. But I remember I was watching Dragon's Den back to back, and I was at home here with my sister and one of my nieces. And as I was watching, I said, you know what? In order for Athletesia to be a success, I have to work on it full time. And it was one of those moments, because I was on medical leave, I wasn't working for my full time job, I wasn't working for Athletesia. And I was able to juggle the two for a very long time. And I've spoken about that in a previous video. And I do believe it's doable up to a point. And so for me, I knew that when I returned to work and gearing up for the launch for Athletesia, it wasn't going to be possible to juggle the two how I had been in the past. And therefore, something had to shift, something had to change. But before I circle back on this year, I want to actually take you back to my previous timeline, because I have worked for myself in the past, because this will again provide you with additional insights. So basically, my previous job, so first Iceland, then Topshop, and then Urban Outfitters, which I've spoken about. So I left Urban Outfitters, I believe it was April 2012. However, in 2011, I remember having a conversation with my boss and saying, "Do you know what? I actually want to do something." And this was when there were all the riots that were happening in London. And so I wanted to do something for young people. So in March 2012, I incorporated Color Your Success. And Color Your Success was basically a business that was going to provide services for young people in schools and so on. And I actually built some incredible relationships then with people who are now my friends to this day. And so one of the key things for brands, Color Your Success, was being able to build partnerships with corporates. And because I came from a HR background, I was able to do that with ease. So I remember going to the Adidas head office and meeting with the HR director at the time. And they were all in on what I was doing. So I was able to get Adidas on board. And it's crazy to think sometimes the things that I've actually done, because there's a lot that I don't speak about, but I'm so proud of a lot of the achievements that I have actually made in life. And I remember when I was at Adidas, I was able to shop in their in-store store. And that was super dope. It was a completely different experience. Anyway, to be totally transparent, it got to a certain point with Color Your Success. And I was like, but this isn't going to make me money ultimately. This is more so something, it was a social enterprise, but still, you need to be generating income. But also, the key thing is, it would rely so much as on me as an individual, and it just wasn't going to work long term. And so I made the company dormant in 2020 and 2014. And then I actually, when did I, da, 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 I then dissolved it in June 2019. So a while afterwards, because I was still deciding and thinking about, do I want to retain the name, etc., and all of that kind of jazz. And then basically, I shared that when I launched Color Your Success. So then I was made redundant in March 2012. But then what I'd done in the summer of 2012 is I thought to myself, okay, I have a HR background. Let me utilize my HR skills and experience to support small businesses. So I then incorporated Vibrant People, and I was able to get clients through that because at the time, there were a lot of small businesses that just didn't have HR. So I was able to go into their office and make sure that they had the basics of HR, such as, contract templates, policies and procedures, and all of that jazz. And so I'm always grateful that I have that to fall back on. Even if things don't go according to plan with Athletia, I've still got that to fall back on. And then it got to a point where I was able to then be a mentoring manager for one of the largest providers for the government startup loan scheme at the time. And so that was additional income because I was doing a lot of work for them, making sure that people were attending mentoring sessions, attending all of their events, giving talks, going through loan applications and all of that kind of stuff. And there was a period of time where it was amazing. It was going so, so well. But then, like with everything, there was a slowdown period. And when that slowdown period came, that's when things got bad. And that's when things got bad for me personally. And a couple of things that I want to touch on is when I was 16, I wrote in my record of achievement that I wanted to own my business one day because I didn't want to depend on anyone. Anyway, I won't go into any more detail on that. That's all it said. And so basically, I believe that when I went into full time, when I went into working for myself full time, because I had a buffer and I was able to do that. So that dream that I had at the age of 16, I was able to bring it to life because I had the ability to do so. And I have never been a risk taker, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to grab this opportunity with both hands and I'm going to go for it. But here's the thing. I did not have a good enough plan or strategy to prepare me fully for the journey of working for myself. I was blessed with opportunities that were put in front of me that supported me. But at the same time, I wasn't planning enough outside of that. So then when things dried up, I was left in a prickly predicament, to say the least. What ended up happening is I got myself in so much debt. So much debt to the point where I almost lost the roof over my head. That is how deep it was. And there was one day where all I had in my bank account was 50p. And that number is it represents so much larger, something so much larger now. And I really wish that I had kept the bank statement at that time. And I remember the next day I had a client meeting to go to see if they wanted to take me on to provide HR services. And so someone actually supported me with the travel money for that. I was blessed to be able to get that client. And so again, it meant that I had a bit of a buffer, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't going to last. And it got to a certain point, being completely open and transparent, where I literally felt like I was in the deep end of the sea and there was no light in sight on the surface. And I had to take time, and I'm talking years, to fight my way to the top to see that light and break through and see the sky and see the sunshine. And it was a lot. It was one of the most darkest periods of my life, but I learned so much from that experience of going through financial difficulty. And I remember at that time, I blamed God for the situation that I was in. Sounds absolutely ridiculous saying it now. And what I had to do is I had to hold myself accountable for the choices and decisions that I had made in my life. I had to hold myself accountable for the fact that I didn't plan and I didn't have a strategic plan as to how I was actually going to fully sustain myself as someone who was working for herself. And literally, the moment that I took that accountability, everything shifted. But not only did that shift, my relationship and closeness to God also shifted. And I can share where I am now in my life and even where I got to in my life at a certain point is pretty unbelievable to me. And I think back and I just think to myself, do you know what? If I didn't take that ownership, if I didn't take those steps, that wouldn't have been the case. And it's one of those things with God guiding, ordering, and leading my steps. This is why I am where I am today. But I always speak about, the inner work that has to be done because you can't expect anybody to save you. You have to be able to save yourself. And so, even when I was going through that financial difficulty, I had to shift my mindset completely. I had to change how I viewed money. And the way how I look at money now is money comes and money grows. The way how I was raised is money comes and money goes. No, money comes and money grows, okay? Because there is always a way to be able to generate income. You need that plan and you need that strategy. And I remember there was one day and I was walking down the road and it was raining outside. And I had created this motivational playlist from all YouTube videos and I downloaded it to my iPhone. And I remember I was walking back home and it was raining and I was crying so hard in the rain. And it was part of that process of releasing, but also acknowledging the journey that I was on and being able to see that it's dark right now, but the light will come eventually. And it did. And so I understand that when it comes to life, there can be so many challenges and difficult situations, but you have to believe that there is something else on the other side for you. And that's not something that I believe someone can necessarily do for you. It's something that you have to find within yourself. And this is why I view life from a completely different lens. I am not a complainer. If there is something and I'm like, oh, damn, that happened or whatever, I will literally go into solution focus mode. Everything is figure outable. What am I going to do about this? And that doesn't mean that I don't sit with my feelings because I do, but I always have to think about, okay, that happened, but what's next? What are you going to do? Am I going to sit there and wallow or am I going to figure a way out of this? And so now when things come up, and there was literally something that came up last night, I had to be like, oh my gosh, what the hell? This is really bad news. But then I had to go into, okay, cool, this has happened. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is what you can do. Because if I don't do that, I don't move forward. And everybody's absolutely different, but that is my mindset and that is how I operate. And that is what has served me in life. And then also, it got to a certain point where I was like, right, I need to get proper contract work. So in February 2016, I managed to get a contract job, HR job with House of Fraser. And that was money going through my company at the time. And I left House of Fraser in February 2017. So that was awesome because I actually had steady flowing income. And I was meant to be there, I think it was like for 6 months, but they extended my contract. And then following on from that, I had a contract with the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. And that was July 2017 to July 2018. And so 2018 is actually when I joined Global Fashion Group as their group HR manager. And the reason for that is I said to myself, if there is a point where I have an opportunity that's permanent, that means I go back to being an employee, I'm going to take it. And Global Fashion Group GFG was that opportunity. And I'm so glad that I took that step for myself because it was able to further support me to get out of the debt situation that I was in. And I became debt free, which is nuts, but something that I'm so, so proud of. And so, how I manage money now, and some people are like, oh, wouldn't you get a loan? And I'm like, no, there are things about that just completely freak me out because I never want to go back to having 50p in my bank. So I operate very differently when it comes to money. And then also, one of the things that I need to highlight is in 2017, I launched Brands of Color. So Brands of Color was a membership platform for Black founders. And then eventually it was Black female entrepreneurs because that was the women were mainly the ones at the forefront of it. And I closed that in January 2020. I'm looking down to make sure I got the dates correct. But in 2019, I was at a point where I felt like I had sacrificed so, so much for little return. And I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I remember messaging my sister with that. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so that's when I knew that brands of color had to come to an end. And, I could focus on my full time employment and I could just breathe and be. But at heart, I've always known that I was someone who, I don't know, destined to be an entrepreneur. And so even when I was at GFG, I was doing something called She's So Audacious in the background. I had a notebook, and the notebook is my reminder of, again, business 101, not having a proper plan and strategy. But the thing is, I don't regret anything that I've done because absolutely everything has led me to the point where I am today. All of those lessons, all of those learnings, all of those experiences, I'm able to put that in to Athletesia. And not only that, everything that I've learned from every single employer and my last employer, GFG, I'm able to also leverage that as well because of the relationships that I've built, because of the role that I was in. And one of the things that I want to speak about is what is really key when someone is thinking about moving into full time founder mode. And so I break it down in three ways. So the first one is being mentally prepared. The second is financially stable to be able to do that. And then the third is having a strategic plan. How are you going to make money? So when it comes to being mentally prepared, when you're working for someone, you're being held accountable, you're on somebody else's schedule. When you work for yourself, you don't have any of that. You have to hold yourself accountable. You have to decide what is your time and schedule going to look like. So for me right now, I have a manufacturer in Turkey and I have manufacturers in China. So some weeks, like this week, my mornings have been spent communicating with my manufacturers in China because of the time difference to ensure that they have absolutely everything that they need. But one of the things that I will always make sure each day is I have time for my mental health and well-being. And so that can be linked to reading, doing yoga in the morning, going and working out, but then knowing that how I manage my day means that I may need to put more time in at the front end or the back end. Say, for example, last night, I was awake until I was working here until almost 4 o'clock in the morning because of the news that I had received. I had to then figure out, okay, what is the plan? And I had to work through everyone and fire off all the emails, etc. And so that comes part and parcel with running your own business. And I'll be honest, I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of what is to come because there is so much more that is involved that I haven't reached yet, simply because Athletesia hasn't launched. And when it comes to finances, I am in a very, very unique and blessed position where I left my employer and I have a decent buffer. Athletesia is fully self-funded. I'm able to fund Athletesia and also fund myself as well. I appreciate and fully understand that that is not the case for everyone. And so I recently commented on a post about the fact that I had recently left full-time employment and I was now working for myself. And someone had basically commented back, and I was just like, look, I am and always will be a huge advocate for working full time while building your business in the background, using your weekends, your evenings, your lunch breaks, and any given moment that you have during the day. I will always be an advocate for that because I don't believe in leaping from a full time job without knowing where your next paycheck is going to come from. That for me doesn't make sense. Everybody is different, but for me, it's a no. And obviously, there are people out there who have done it and who are now incredibly successful. But I believe that it's a very, very personal choice that a person needs to make. And I knew for me, having 50p in my bank account, I didn't want to go back to having 50p in my bank account. So I needed to make sure that I was financially stable and set up to be able to do what I'm doing now. Then also when it comes to, the plan, the strategic side of it, how exactly are you going to make money? And so I've spoken previously about this, but Athletesia has, a profit and loss, various different tabs. And so I spoke about the forecast, and a forecast is a guesstimate. I do not know what's going to happen when I launch. And so I need to make sure that if things don't go according to plan, it's like a best case scenario, worst case scenario. Can I cover the worst case scenario? The ideal scenario is that Athletesia can pay for itself in terms of, the day-to-day general expenses and any future orders, but that's going to take time. is possible for sure, but it's going to take time, and it's being really realistic about that. And it's managing personal and business funds so carefully. And so Helen, who is the CFO at GFG, I absolutely adore her. Incredible, incredible CFO. And so the way how I work in my business now, if there is something that I want to spend money on, I will say, what would Helen do? What would Helen do in this situation? How can I learn from her? And so there are some things that I would love to do and people who I would like to work with, but I can't, because that is not the best way for me to be spending company funds right now. So I have to look at alternatives. And there was recently something where I had to say to someone, look, until Athletesia is generating revenue, I will own this and do this myself. And actually using AI as a step by step to support me with the process, right? And doing my due diligence around that as well. But those are some of the compromises and sacrifices that you then have to make. And there are so many different tools and solutions and platforms to help you build your business, but which ones are crucial? So, say, for example, for me, I have Zero, which is an accounting software. But here's the thing, I also have a Google Sheet because I'm one of those people, I need to visually go through everything in detail for it to sit in my brain, basically. But when it comes to content marketing, I literally use Google Sheets and Google Docs. I refuse to invest in a social media platform to do that for me, because that's an additional cost coming out of the business that I do not need to be coming out of the business. And so that's the mindset of, from a business perspective, but then also personally, how am I now spending my money? Are there things that I could curve back on? So, say, for example, one of the things that I really wanted to do is work from different co working spaces, but I'm like, Danielle, you've got an office right here. Like, you can sit here and work. There will be occasions when I will go and work in different spaces simply because I think it's good from a mental health and well-being perspective, but then also to be able to meet and connect with new people. But that £35 a day or whatever it may be can be better spent elsewhere. And so that is my mindset and how I operate. And so those are the three key things there. And then also, thinking about your network. Who is going to be your network? Because I can speak about athletes here all day long. I can chew people's ears off, but I know not everybody wants to hear it. Sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, okay, can she shut up now? Right. And so when you have a network of people that you can go to who are on a similar journey as you, that makes a huge, massive difference, because they're just enthusiastic about your story and your journey as you are. And that is a truly beautiful thing. And alongside that, it's also being able to, think about how are the different ways that you can build that. I, for example, say, some people will be like, oh, do you want to join this membership? And I'm like, I just don't have the headspace. So, in terms of a membership that I am a member of, is the UKFT. So, UK Fashion and Textiles. Absolutely incredible, best money spent ever. Because whenever I need support with my business, I can reach out to them and sometimes jump on a call. So, say, for example, when it comes to sustainability, there's someone at UKFT who I connect with. When I'm working on all of my copy for my sustainability pages, she will review that for me and audit. And then I say to her, look, this is what I'm doing with my manufacturers. What are your thoughts? Getting certificates and compliance and all of that jazz. And so those are the additional things to be thinking about as well. So the journey doesn't have to be a lonely one. I have freelancers that I work with as well, and I'm going to speak about that in a separate video. But to close, the transition, it's possible, but it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. And I feel that you have to truly also believe in what you're doing, your vision and your mission. And you have to go for it. You have to be prepared to put the time in. Someone said to me, oh, what are you doing for the bank holiday weekend? And I'm like, bank holiday weekend? There's a bank holiday weekend, but I'm working. I've got manufacturers here, there, and, in Turkey, in China. I've got things to do and get done. There isn't that time out. I do allow myself to breathe, but I know that I have to be all in on my business. And that means sometimes working around the clock. It is what it is. I'm not asking for any sympathy. It's my choice. And I absolutely love what I'm doing. And I believe that it will truly pay off in the long run. And the other thing that I want to say is linked to my faith. If it wasn't for Jesus Christ, I can honestly say that I do not believe I would be where I am now. And I am so grateful for going through that difficult period of time because, like I said, it brought me closer to God and it brought me closer to a place where my relationship with Jesus is just such a beautiful thing. And there has been so many things that I feel that I have been protected from, and things that have happened even on the Athletesia journey, and where I've been like, oh no, I didn't want that to happen. But I look now and I'm like, thank you, Jesus. Like literally, thank you so, so much, because I see now why the dot didn't connected in the way how I originally planned. And you know what? The way how the dots have ended up connecting is way better than it would have been. And so I just want to encourage you not to also feel pressured into going all into full-time founder mode and just doing it at your own time. And I never forget when I met with Stephanie of FB and Humble at a female invest event. And I asked her, when did you know it was time? And she said it was just within her gut. And being where I am now and going through what I have, I can tell you that it's nothing but the truth. Like literally, it is just so within you and you're like, I can't do it anymore. Like I have to go all in on this. And so when that moment arrives, you'll know it. Nobody can tell you. I hope that this video has served you and you've got value from it. Please feel free to share your thoughts with a comment. I would absolutely love to hear from you. Also feel free to DM me on Instagram too. And please feel free, well, please subscribe and like this video if you're not yet. I'll have more content coming. And if there is anything that you would like me to speak about, please share it and I will add it to my Google Sheet plan. Thank you so, so much. And I'll see you in the next video.